In today's episode, I'm going to sit down with one of my students. His name is Danny. He's earned his profitability badge here at Warrior Trading, and I want you to hear his story from going from a trader who knew nothing about the market all the way up to what is now a six-figure trader sitting on his best year of his entire career right now. I'll remind you, as always, my results aren't typical and neither are Danny's. We don't track the typical result of every trader who's in our community using our software or in the classes, but we do have a program where we will verify traders who want to share with us their broker statements and prove that they are profitable. And Danny has done that. He's earned his profitability badge, and let's sit down and hear from him about his experience learning to trade. He's got some big ups and some big downs, as many traders do. And I think he's going to share with you some words of wisdom and some tips and tricks that you can implement in your own trading today. So let's go ahead and dive in with this interview with Danny. All right, first question. So we're going to start at the top. I want you to tell us what your life was like before you started trading, so we can kind of understand this transformation that has happened since you began. So what was life like for you before you started trading?
I think my life looked very similar to probably most people's life. I had a 9 to 5 job, which I eventually left. And this is probably where my life starts to look a little bit different than most people's. I started working with my dad, doing supply chain consulting and software sales. And it was fairly part-time, was definitely keeping me afloat, but I was also looking for other things for income. So I started coaching a swim team. I started doing some photo and video work. And at some point, probably after about 2 years of that, I was looking at my accounts and they weren't growing. I was just kind of keeping myself afloat, which was good, but I was like, I need to figure something else out because I'm just not like I want to be stacking for retirement, you know?
When you
Uh,
say accounts, do you mean like retirement accounts or like just bank accounts?
just like bank accounts,
Yeah.
yeah. I wasn't really saving at all. I was kind of just like getting by, doing okay, but didn't have
Mhm.
much wiggle room and I just needed to figure something out to actually give myself like a potential retirement. And so back in college, my one of my housemates had done some swing trading, and so I kind of had an introduction to it at that point, and I was interested in it. Always knew that I had some interest in it. And then it was like December of 2019, I would say, is when I think the story that I have in my mind is that YouTube recommended some trading guy to me. I took a look at some of his videos. It was interesting still, and I got into it. I was definitely scared of trading at first. There's a lot of misconceptions, or not even misconceptions, just bad reputation about losing your money.
For
Not
sure.
many people make it out and actually become profitable. So I was definitely tentative and scared. But I dove in and I just started trying to learn as much as I possibly could. And then, so that was like January of 2020, and here we are about 5 years later.
Right. So you basically you came in at such an interesting time because it was like coming
Yeah.
right into the beginning of the pandemic and then the
Mhm.
lockdown. Did you start with real money right away, or how did you approach that?
I did, yeah. And I had no idea. I didn't even start trading because of the pandemic or anything like that. It just happened to happen.
Yeah.
I did start trading with real money. I opened an account with TD Ameritrade with $500 in it. Because like I said, I was afraid of losing that money, and I didn't have much money that I could afford to lose. So I was trading really, really small size. I was trading like 10 to 25 shares. And
Okay.
I remember like 10 to $20 on a day, green or red, was like a normal amount. I remember if I made 20
Really?
bucks, that was a good day. Yeah, totally.
My, yeah, that's a really good day.
Yeah.
Let me just jump on the whiteboard here. So I just want to show people because this is kind of incredible. This is something I talk about all the time. So if you're trading with an average of 10 shares and
Mhm.
you're making $10 a day, let's just scale that up. You go to 100 shares, you're making $100 a day. You go to 1,000 shares, you're making $1,000 a day. If you go to, I mean, you go 10,000 shares, but you could see where we're going here. This is like incredible for proof of concept.
Yeah.
I'm kind of blown away because, to be honest, pulling $1 a share out of the
Mm.
market, usually I say like
That's
10
good.
cents, 20 cents a share. So what were you trading to pull $1 a share out of the market?
Well, and so we trade a little bit different. You trade less than I do. And so I've always kind of had a correlation in my mind of the share size that I'm using. If I'm on a good day, my P&L is going to look kind of like my typical share size that I'm using that day. So
Mm,
if I worked up to using like a regular average of 1,000 shares across all of my trades for the day, I would think that $1,000 for the day is like I did okay. I did pretty well. Um, but that's not to say that there weren't all of those days that were like $3 or $5, and then some of the red days too. So I started with $500 in my account, quickly realized two things. Number one, that wasn't really going to get me anywhere. Number two was that I probably wasn't going to lose all of my money right away. So
okay.
I added, a couple hundred here and there, a couple thousand here and there, taking from pretty much all that I had saved from retirement or, from my last full-time job, which was like pretty much 25,000 that I had
Okay.
keeping me afloat in my checking account.
Yeah.
So I got myself to the point of having like 5,000 or so in my TD account. Um, but there were definitely days that like I remember in I think it was like March and April of 2020, just a few months after I had started, I averaged down into a bad trade or just held too long, got caught in an offering. I think I remember all three of those things happening. And there were two or 3 days within like a week or two of each other that were like negative 300 days. And those days were crushing. I remember I almost quit. And so there were those days too, but I was determined and I was just looking at like how can I make those days further apart and less
Yep.
bad when they do happen? Because at the same time, I hadn't joined Warrior yet, but
Yep.
you were like my entire focus of content of what I was watching on YouTube at that point. I was watching
Yep.
every single daily recap. I was watching like pretty much every video that you had posted on your channel previously. And so I knew that that was kind of normal and typical. But I also knew that the way to get through that and to get into profitability was to figure out how to make those red days hopefully less big, less hurtful, and also further apart. And that's
Hmm.
that's pretty much what I started doing and started kind of making some progress from there.
So then what would you say in the first couple of months was your primary, like what was your go-to setup? What was your like this is the setup I'm trading to, make money?
So when I started trading, like right at the beginning, you were still broadcasting on YouTube at that point. And so I
Yeah.
would watch a lot of your videos or I'd be following along. I wasn't trading with you, or I wasn't trying to like mirror trade you, but I started realizing that a lot of the trades I was getting into, I was buying the tops and selling the bottoms. And
Okay.
I was like doing the inverse of you at that time.
Yeah.
And I think basically I just had the realization if I do the opposite, if I buy the bottom, even though it feels scary and I'm a beginner and I don't know exactly where the bottom ends yet, if I buy down at the bottom on a stock that is in a strong pattern, I have a much better chance of having a green trade. And so that's kind of where I initially started to find a little bit of edge and some profitability, or at least that my stats were improving.
So were those like dip trades, would you say, or just buying on pullbacks, like as it was crawling back up?
Yeah, more so dip trades. So like
Okay.
fast types of like it dropped.
Yeah.
Totally know where the bottom is yet. I'm not even good at reading level two of the tape yet, but I know that it's not going to go probably a whole lot lower if I buy here, and there's a good chance that it might bounce. So, um,
Interesting. So then were you
yeah.
using like I mean I love that strategy, and that is a strategy that at the beginning of the pandemic, when I was running that live stream on YouTube, that was like, we're all in lockdown. I'm just going to run this live stream. We're going to trade,
Yeah.
together, whatever. So that was during that period. And I remember that was when I kind of developed that setup or that strategy
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
I mean, I was trading the breakouts, I'd buy
Yeah.
into the breakout, but then, we would see these flushes and some
Yeah.
of them were kind of dramatic. You would see
Mhm.
like a 50-cent flush. And I just started noticing this pattern that they kept bouncing back up.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
So I was like, if I buy this dip, then I mean, look, they can go lower, but I'm going to buy the dip. So essentially, what I was looking for was anytime something dropped, like a 10-cent drop, not really enough. It needs to,
Hmm.
well,
Hmm.
what was it for you? What did you feel like you needed to say, like, I'll buy this dip?
What did I need to see to buy the dip? Yeah, I agree. Not like a 10-cent drop, but I think I would probably describe it more as like maybe even a false breakout or a quick pop above a psychological or technical level, like half dollar,
Mm-hmm.
whole dollar,
Mm-hmm.
or some sort of daily level.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's the first time in the day that it pops over that level, usually it's going to pop over it for just a second, and then people are going to sell because we don't know if it's going to hold yet. And
Right.
so you'll see the selling. And um, for me, I would usually like visually, I wouldn't go by cents, like 10 cents, 20 cents or whatever. I would like to see the red candle come down probably like a third to half of the previous green candle. So like
Interesting.
a quick amount of profit taking.
Okay.
It still maintained the chart looking bullish overall.
And
Or it
that's
could even
key.
be a little bit more than that, a little bit more of a drop, as
Yeah.
long as it kind of like stopped and we saw that there were people buying it at that point.
So let me whiteboard this because this is another one of those kind of things I think is helpful to visualize. So when you
Mhm.
get, let's say, three green candles in a row, and then maybe you get two small candles, you get the formation of a bull flag. It pops
Mhm.
back up, you surge back higher, you pull back, and let's say this next pullback is right underneath a critical level, like $6, right?
Mhm.
And maybe that's a daily level or it's sort of resistance. We see that kind of pop up, and then that jackknife candle where it ends up flushing back down. So initially it's green and then it goes red.
Mhm.
That dip there, if you get a drop and it drops down 20, 30 cents, but
Mhm.
you're still generally, trending up, you're still above your 9 EMA, you're still above
Yeah.
your 20 EMA, you're still above your VWAP, then even though you get that short-term flush, the
Mhm.
trend is still bullish. So if you stepped back and you looked at this on a 5-minute chart, maybe
Yeah.
a 5-minute pattern would, I mean, it would still look really bullish,
Yeah,
which is very
exactly.
different from buying something that's like at low of day or is
Right.
below VWAP,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So you're primarily trading stocks that they have to have some momentum. But give me kind of like the breakdown of your go-to in terms of maybe price and flow and news or not news.
So at that point, I really didn't have a great understanding of what I traded best. So we're talking like 2020, 2021, when most things were going up. And so you could get into a position and the market would be very forgiving. And
Yeah.
so what happened was I became profitable pretty quickly, but I didn't develop a great understanding of my best price range and best like float and how stocks move differently depending on their float or
Okay.
the different fundamentals behind them, like how much dilution do they have? Is the company potentially selling in this move and
Right.
stuff like that?
If you saw something moving, you were trading it. It might be
Pretty much.
AMC or
Yeah.
GameStop or Tesla. It could be anything. But if it was
Yeah.
moving, you were interested.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny you mentioned Tesla actually because that is where I pretty much initially found profitability was this was like probably 5 or 6 splits ago at this point, so that it trades very differently now. But I was dip trading Tesla because it bounced well, and I got pretty good at reading it. So every stock is like its own little snowflake, and so especially for large caps, there's people who trade just like the same couple large cap tickers every day or not. So like generally I would say that pretty much any of the stocks I was trading were like under 30 million float except for Tesla.
Okay.
Um, because I was trading stuff that was popping up on the momentum scanner and things that were um, moving well, showing strength, and generally that means having a bit of a lower float, like 20, 30 million. We saw a lot between like 10 to 20 million at that point too that moved really well.
Yeah.
Um, so like 10 to 20 million and probably like the $3 to $20 range, which actually is pretty much the same for me now as far as price range.
And with a relatively small account, those are all more affordable. But
Mhm.
what about Tesla? Did that force you to have to add more money into your account, or were you at a point there where, your account was sort of slowly growing, and so it was,
Yeah, so that's a good question. I started trading January 2020 with a $500 account.
yeah,
By June of 2020 or so, I had like I think April maybe was tiny, tiny green. May was a little bit more green. June was even more green. And so by the end of July, I took the remainder basically out of my savings and went from 10 or 12 in my TD account to 25 over PDT.
wow,
And then August, I had a $10,000 month
wow,
because
wow.
it felt like superpowers. I was just able to take as many trades as I wanted all of a
Yeah.
sudden.
But that's so good though that you throttled, you kept yourself reined in for
Hmm.
those first certainly 6 months
Yeah,
trading with a smaller account. So it was a cash
right.
account. So when you
Hmm.
ran out of cash, you'd wait for it to settle. So,
Right. And
but you
I
were
would
trading with
trade
small
half the
size.
account every other day.
Got it. Right, right. Because it was T2 at that time.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So it would take 2 days to settle. So you trade on Monday. Those funds would be back on Wednesday. So you trade half the account Monday, half the account Tuesday. The other half is back available Wednesday. Then the
Yeah.
other half's there Thursday. And then so it's just half the account every day.
Yeah.
So now someone's starting because it changed to T1
I
settlement. You could
know.
trade the full account every
Yeah.
day.
Yeah. Lucky,
So
lucky people. And
yeah,
I was interested to see how the market would respond to that, if at all, when it changed back in like, what was that, just May or so of
May.
this year?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was curious to see how the market would respond because all of a sudden you have some number of accounts under 25,000 that are cash accounts that now
Mhm.
have double the buying power, which are small accounts, but who knows how many of them there are? I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was curious to see. I don't feel like I really noticed much of anything in particular, but
Hmm. Well, now that you say that, I would say that things really did pick up following that because, of course, now part of that was because June we had GameStop back in play, but that of course is a stock
yeah.
that's popular with people with
Hmm.
smaller accounts, often meme
Hmm.
stocks. And then we went right into July where we had all those Chinese stocks, and then August was
Yeah.
tough, but then September
Yeah.
and now October bounced back. So I would say
Hmm.
these last few months. Have been stronger than prior to May. I don't know if T1 settlement is a
Yeah.
factor though. There's a number of factors that you could.
Yeah, I would totally agree with you. May before October, May was my newest record month.
Really?
Um, mhm. Yeah, who
Interesting.
knows what to attribute it to? I just traded well and we had some good moves and June was good too, July was good too, August slowed down quite a bit. September was actually a record red month, career red month for me, but then October was pretty much triple that in the green. So
Yeah. 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 And was October a record green month for you?
it was, yeah, by quite a bit.
Yeah. Right.
Mhm.
So so now you're at a place where let's talk about kind of your trajectory over these last few years. So year one, you really start relatively slow with small account, trading cash. By the end of year one, end of 2020, you'd made some progress. Was it
Mhm.
in 2021? I remember you told me previously you had like something like a $40,000 month and then you gave it back the next month or something. When was that?
Yeah, so 2020, all of 2020, I think that I made like 23,000 profit,
Okay.
which was accounted for between like the last 5 months of the year, which was
Yeah.
incredible for a first year trader.
Yeah.
Um,
That's huge.
it
The fact
was
that you didn't
incredible.
go negative is huge. I mean, that's a lot of
Well,
people start and go deep negative, right?
I
So,
did go negative.
okay.
The deep, of course I went negative, but the deepest part of my drawdown was like negative 800,
Okay.
which you know, generally is not that bad at all. But at
No.
the time for me, that was pretty much max pain. I didn't really have much more to give.
Right, because and that's when you're thinking about maybe throwing in the towel. You'd had a
Mhm.
couple of really big losses, and you're like,
Mhm.
okay,
Yeah.
I gotta, is this gonna? And then, that kind of makes me think about the fact that the pain of the loss, like it doesn't matter if it's 300 or if it's 3,000 or if it's 30,000 or 300,000. The
Yeah.
pain is pain. You know what I
Oh
mean?
yeah.
Like if when you're
Mhm.
feeling that pain and you're in that place where you're like, okay, is this for nothing? Is all this time I've put into
Yeah.
this
Mhm.
even worth it? When you're
Yep.
questioning, should I keep going? Like, I think it's so good to start with a small account. So when you
Mhm.
experience that, okay, it's $800, but it is a lot easier in time to recover from. I tried this thing, I lost 800 bucks, and then I moved on. Because you hear
Mhm.
about people who will
Yeah.
lose 8,000, 80,000. I mean, a
Yep.
crazy amount of money
Mm.
before they have that wake up call that either this
Yeah.
isn't for me, or, that they have to follow certain rules and a strategy and this and that. So
Yeah.
you're fortunate in a lot of ways.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it hurt for sure, but relatively was a very manageable amount of money.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, just like you, I've heard plenty of stories of people who have been down tens of thousands of dollars before they either turn it around and start to get it, or they just don't. And then it's like, well, that's too bad.
Right. So
But
year one, 23,000. So then was it in year two that you kind of had some really big months, but did
yeah,
you fly too close to the sun?
um, a little bit. So I can't remember how I did in January of 2021, but February of 2021 was a big month for me. I was up 40,000 on the month.
Wow.
I remember this, and this is towards the end of the month. It was the last couple days, and I had started the day at um like maybe 35,000 or so on the month. And I was trading my P&L. I had just broken 40,000 for the month and just took like a couple paper cuts, a couple thousand some dollar losses, and I was back to um I can't remember exactly, but it was close to the end of the day, close to the close, and I got stuck short on a stock with like 4,000 shares, and it started spiking because the market closed. It started spiking. I was
Mm,
stuck, and I was like, why can't I get out? And I realized eventually that I hadn't changed my time in force. So the orders that I was sending to the market were going to nothing. And
yeah.
I took a $20,000 red day.
Wow.
So I
Wow.
went
So
from
5 points. So it went up like
something
$5
like
a
that.
share on 4,000 shares. Wow.
Yeah, something like that. It was
Wow.
CDXC, which actually was just in play last week, and I
Mm.
lost like 600 bucks on it. I was like, finally, we get a chance because
Meet
to this
again.
day, CDXC is still my all-time biggest red ticker. Um,
Wow.
and I
Hmm.
was like, I finally get a chance to make it a little bit better, and I still was red on it.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so I went from up 40 on the month to giving some back and then taking
Sure.
a $20,000 loss and finishing the month at like 18,000,
Okay.
which was still a record month for me. Um, and you can't complain too much about 18,000, but
Not in 1 month. No, you can't. I mean,
yeah,
the thing, of course, with trading is I mean, you could have an $18,000 month, and then the next month you make nothing, or even a red month. So
yeah,
it's
or you
easy
could
to start
catch
to
that
say,
$20,000 red trade too.
sure, it's easy to kind of get in this mindset of 18,000 a month. That's 180. That's 220 a year.
Yeah.
You start. I'm
Hmm.
now a six-figure trader. I
Yeah.
can, and then you get
It
ahead of
doesn't really
yourself.
work like that.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah, every day is a new day. And just because I made 18,000 this month doesn't at all mean that I'm going to make 18,000 the rest of the months of the year.
How did you recover from that?
So luckily we were in such a hot market that I recovered it in like 2 weeks. So actually, I remember February of 2021, I was pretty stressed out like most of the time because things were just moving. And um, I was such a new trader that it was just a little overwhelming.
Hmm.
And so I remember March of 2021, I didn't have any record days. Like February 2021 was like new record day. 3 days later, new record day. Next week,
Yeah.
another new record.
Yeah. It was so
Um,
hot.
yeah. And so I remember March of 2021, I didn't have any new record days, but a lot more consistency. And I actually finished the month at like 27,000.
Wow. New record.
Hmm. And then the rest of the year became more difficult, slowed down, and
Mm.
I think April was like a $20,000 red month, which,
Okay.
just like we were saying, just because you make 18 or 27 one
Sure.
month doesn't mean anything, really.
Yeah.
Especially when you're that new and don't have like the consistent record. Um, so that $20,000 loss and then that big red month were both just like that, those $300 red days hurt just the same, felt the same.
Yep.
Um, but I was like, really the only way for me is forward. And a huge part of that thought process for me was seeing you do it and seeing your results and that you've been doing it for like 15 years. And I was
Well, you
just like,
also got to see on February 4th, 2021, I had the
yep.
biggest red day of my career. I was down
Mhm.
$275,000 in one day.
Yeah, I remember
And
on
I
your
recover
birthday.
I know it was my birthday. And I did recover it a few weeks later. I finished February at about 400,000. It was, I was taking a lot of risk at that time. We had GameStop and all these other stocks,
Yeah.
um you sort of saw on display. And I remember at that red day, there was a part of me that was like, I don't even know. I can't, I don't even want to show up tomorrow. Like, how do I even
Yeah.
begin to chip away at this
Yep.
size loss? And then I just realized, I just need to keep my head down and just
Hmm.
keep taking one step forward, one step forward. And next thing you know, I'm going to put my head up and you know, I'm going to be there.
Yeah.
And it might take 6 weeks, it might take 6 months, but I'll get there. But I had the benefit of all of these years of consistency under my belt where I knew that as long as I went back to basics, as long as I stuck with the core of my strategy, I would survive. And I told myself, I said, Ross, all the money to recover your loss is in the market, but there's one
Hmm.
rule: you have to follow every point of your strategy:
Hmm.
stock selection, price, float, news, relative volume, everything. If you deviate from that, you're just going to lose more money.
Yep.
So the question really is, are you willing to be disciplined right now? And the obvious answer was, in exchange to recover those losses, absolutely.
Hmm. Yeah.
So with you being a little bit newer and not quite having as, I mean, a year of track record is not nothing, but it also is at that point where you can kind of question, like, was it a fluke? Was it just good luck? Was it beginner's luck?
Oh,
So
totally.
how did you deal with that during, following that drawdown?
Um, well, yeah, totally. That's a huge point. I also didn't know, but I was determined to have it not be luck and just the market. And um, when I was trying to figure out a new source of income, I was looking into a couple things actually. I was doing online courses that were available for free on web development. I learned how to build my own website. I was interested potentially in becoming a programmer or a web developer. Um, what I really wanted was to find something that I could do on my own with an internet connection and provide for myself. And what I really, really wanted was to not have to rely on anybody else to do that. I didn't want to have to work with anybody else, like in a co-worker type capacity. I didn't want to have to like sell anything to somebody or have to rely on somebody buying things or employing me and that kind of thing.
Yep.
Um, so I had such a big motivator to figure out how to do this. And I didn't have the track record yet. But I saw you doing it and I had joined Warrior at this point. So we have the room and we have all these verified badge holding profitable people. And I'm like, so it's like one of two things is happening. All of it is fake and it's all made up, or these people actually exist. And if they exist and they're doing it, then why can't I?
Right.
And kind of similar to you, I was like, I just have to figure out what my discipline and what my main strategy is and dial into it. And you've always said, um, especially in some of your stuff from a little bit further back, you used to give this presentation where you were talking about how you hadn't found success yet in trading, but you dug into all of your stats and you were
Yeah.
figuring out where were you taking the biggest losses, where were you actually making wins, and that was pretty much it for me too. And one of the other mentors who we talk about, Jess, I've always thought it's so funny. Any people who ask him like, what's his aha moment?
Yeah.
Uh, he says the same thing, and it's always been my answer too, which is I haven't really had an aha moment. It's just over time figuring out how to make less mistakes and how to lean into what I'm good at. And so that's all I tried to do after I had had those losses.
Yeah.
And
That's
again,
good.
luckily we were in a market that supported it. I totally agree with what you had said about, I don't know if it's going to take 6 days, 6 weeks, or 6 months to make it back, but
Yeah.
honestly, it doesn't matter. You put your head down, you look for whatever that next good trade is, and you wait for it. You take it when it comes up, and one at a time, eventually you look up and you're back where you wanted to be.
Yeah. Yeah, and that I kind of realized that too. The reason that I think I had more of an aha moment, which I recognize more in hindsight than in the moment. I mean, I didn't know it was an aha moment in the moment, but it was because I hit rock bottom, and
Yeah.
I had to fund my account with more money. And so during the downtime, it was like, okay, what are you going to do differently when you fund this account the next time?
Yeah.
And then I did things differently, and that was my turning point. So it's like, well, all right, I guess that was my turning point then. But I think the challenge for I suppose for a lot of traders, probably you experience this, and Jess as well, is when you're at that place of, you know, I'm still building my track record, I've had a big loss, um, you know, do emotions blind me from
Mm.
being able to see what's really in front of me?
Hmm.
Because sometimes you end up getting this, I guess it's emotional hijack, where your emotions get so big that you just start trading your P&L. You're just trading the numbers. And you know, I remember telling myself at one point that it doesn't matter how much you've lost in the past. And I had a real emotional attachment to the money I'd lost because it was money I got from my father when he
Yeah.
passed away. So I felt so guilty and so upset, and I said, you know what, just put that aside for a second, because if you follow this strategy and you're consistently making $200 a day, and you can do that for the rest of your life,
Yeah.
doesn't matter what it costs you to learn this. You've got it
Hmm.
now.
Hmm.
So just follow the rules today. And that was like, it's a really hard, it was hard for me to kind of forgive myself and let go of, the baggage of those mistakes.
Yeah.
But it was really important to separate myself from that emotion, because I just kept being like trading that P&L where you're just staring at the number and trying to make it half as red as it is, when you're red
Hmm.
and you're trying to recover. And it just it just often becomes this spiral. And
Yeah.
because the reality is the market doesn't care about your number,
Yeah.
right?
Totally.
It'll either give you good opportunities or it won't. And so if it's
Yeah.
giving you good opportunities, you'll trade well and hopefully you'll make money. And if it's not, then trading more isn't going to change that.
Yeah.
If it's a cold day, it's a cold day.
Yeah.
Have you now, as sort of like an observer of your strategy over these years? So we go back to year one, 23,000, then year two, 2021. You had a tough stretch through the summer. Um,
Hmm.
and I remember at some point then, I think, was that the year you got your 100K badge?
Yeah. I had. a 50K badge pretty early on,
Yep.
after I had joined, because I had had like 23 from the year before. And
Yep.
then I think it was like January and February combined or something like that, put me over 50,
Nice.
which is when you interviewed me for the first time.
Yeah.
So almost 4 years ago. And it took me a long time to go from 50 to 100, actually.
Mm.
Um, the rest of the year was okay. I finished 2021 at like 53,000 or something like that. And
Wow.
then the market cooled off in 2022,
Yeah,
and
it did.
the whole year was a huge struggle for me. I think that
Yeah.
the entire year I made like 6,000.
Wow. And that's
Uh,
a lot of dedication to show up every single
yeah.
day,
Hmm.
but not be pulling
Yeah.
away. And 2022 was a tough year for me, and then 2023 was actually worse for me.
I
But how was it
remember
for
that.
you?
Yeah.
2023 was a good year for you, wasn't it? Your best year you'd ever had?
2023 was a record year by like two and a half times
That's
of
awesome.
2021. So that was last year. I finished at about 125,000, I think, with like 10,000 in fees last year. So yeah, very good year for me last year, but 2022 was a big struggle. It took me until the end, or like August of 2022, I think, to get my 100K badge. I remember that. Um, and then from there, things happened pretty quickly. Well, not after getting my 100K badge, but um, so that was in like August of 2022. Still kind of slow through the end of the
Yep.
year. And then I think like November, December started picking up. We had had the All-Star Summit October of 2022. And I picked up a
Okay.
lot from that with Manoli and Chris and Jess
Yep.
and Max among.
Yep.
And for one thing, they were all using Windows and DOS. So
Mm.
DOS, the software,
Yeah.
linked with TD.
Yep.
So I got home, I bought a Windows laptop, I put DOS on it, linked it to TD, and that was definitely a change and kind of a turning point for me.
Yeah.
I think that it wasn't necessarily groundbreaking as much as it gave me a boost to the edge that I already had at that point,
Mm.
which,
It's almost like you were kind of like I sometimes would say like if you're not profitable already on Thinkorswim, switching platforms is probably not going to make a difference.
yeah,
But it was almost like you were carrying like dead weight, or you were just like being there was a ceiling, and
I was a little constrained.
yeah,
Yeah.
constrained. And then once you took that off, you could
Hmm.
trade so much faster. You could move in and out.
Hmm.
You're just your ability because of the offsets and the way the orders
Yeah.
work and the hotkeys. You're just
Hmm.
it's like a little baby bird leaving the nest.
Pretty much, yeah, actually. I love DOS. I still use it.
Yeah.
And so we were talking earlier about like how did my trading strategy change and that kind of stuff. And
Yep.
it was at that point when I got DOS that I actually was able to adapt my strategy a bit to the fact that now I have hotkeys and I can sell a third of my position or half, or sell on the ask or a few cents under the ask, or whatever I wanted to do. And so it made it so that I was able to be a lot more dynamic with how much position I was holding. Do I want to buy here, sell some here, add back more here, do that?
Yeah.
Which you can do with Thinkorswim. It's just not as easy.
No, it's that's
And
exactly right.
yeah.
It feels I've just finished this Thinkorswim challenge with small account challenge and
Hmm.
I mean I did well during the challenge. I achieved my goal, but
Yeah.
my gut feeling through it was I don't know, it just I don't know the best analogy, but it just feels like I can't be nimble. I just
Yeah,
feel
totally.
like I'm just moving a little slower. I'm just like a little clumsier. Everything just takes a little longer. And in a fast moving market, that can be tough. Now, look, I mean,
Yeah.
I know a lot of people use the platform and like it, but
Mhm.
you know, holds you
I'll
back a little
always
bit.
recommend Thinkorswim, TD Schwab, to any
Yeah.
trader who's learning.
Yeah.
Um, I think that the lack of commissions is a great thing for a new trader. I think more than that, they should start in a sim.
Yeah.
Because why lose real money like I did or
Right.
you did?
Yeah.
Now we know that there are better options.
Yep.
But then past that, I think it's a great option for traders who are learning. And you don't have to pay $2 each time you execute a trade.
Yep.
You don't have to pay ECN fees. And I did go from TD and Thinkorswim to Lightspeed and back twice. And then I basically just figured Lightspeed and direct access commissioned brokers just aren't right for my style of trading,
Yep.
which is sometimes more involved or just like more screen time, more trades and shares than you'll put through. So
Yeah.
for me, it would just eat up a lot more of my profit.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I would say that is a little bit of a difference between our strategies because,
mhm,
one of the I mean, although I've used the commission-free brokers and challenges and stuff like that,
mhm.
since once you get used to, the ability to be so nimble and have such fast executions, it's hard to go from, I don't know, I'm thinking of doing something like, and then trying to do the same thing with like snow gloves on. I don't
Yeah.
know, like some like
Mhm.
delicate like watch fixing a watch. You just be like, this
Yep.
is ridiculous. Now, of
Yeah.
course, if you learned with the snow gloves, you'd be like, I guess this is how it works.
This is
But
fun. Yeah.
when you've gotten good at it with the software that lets you be so
Yeah.
dynamic and
And
so
you know what
quick,
that feels like.
yeah, for me it's hard to go back, but I am restrained
Yeah.
in the sense that if I want to trade 100 or 200 times a day, I'm paying
Mhm.
commissions on those trades.
Yeah.
I could spend thousands in commissions. In
Yeah.
fact,
Easily.
we've had days where we've looked at your trades and we looked at mine,
Yeah.
and I remember a couple days where you were up like $1,600 or something, and I was like, well, based on the number of shares you traded and the number of trades you took, I'd
Yeah.
actually be red 1,600 if I took those same exact trades because of fees and commissions.
hmm
It's like $32 in fees and 3,200 in fees and commissions, which is
Yeah.
not unrealistic. So you, without that constraint, you have been able to trade much more actively,
hmm
and really like, I mean, that's where you're able to get with 1,000 shares a full dollar out of the market across
Yeah. Right.
50 trades or
Exactly.
whatever, just
hmm
in and out, buying the dip, selling the pop,
Yeah.
buying the dip, selling the pop,
Yeah.
which I think is hard maybe for a beginner to learn that because it requires, at least in my view, a pretty heightened degree of intuition, to know when to punch those orders, when to buy that
Yeah.
dip.
hmm
Um,
I would
I,
agree with that. And it took me a while to develop that. Like I
yeah,
said, and as I was starting to learn that strategy, I I basically had realized that if I'm buying when it's going down after it has been strong, I have a
mm-hmm,
better chance to get out somewhere green, but it wasn't refined at all yet. Now
mm-hmm,
I'm really in tune with reading level two and like watching a seller walking the price down, and I'll buy the moment it starts thinning out,
totally.
and I'll be in at the dead bottom and I'll get
Yeah,
the most of the pop.
yep,
Uh, but yeah, it took a while to refine that. And it's also because it's scary. And as I'm a newer trader trying to learn this strategy and I'm just buying as it's going down.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, it can be challenging.
So 2023, 125,000, roughly before fees and commissions, which were 10 grand, best
Yep.
year you'd ever had. And now I know you're putting in your paperwork for the 500K badge. You've got I know you've crossed over that, so you're going to be earning that badge next. So
Yep.
where are you at on 2024 year to date?
That is a good question. I can pull it up here. Uh, let's see. I think I'm somewhere just under 400.
Wow.
So a little bit
Wow.
different. Let
Wow.
me pull that up. 354. Yeah.
Okay, 354. That's
Yeah.
phenomenal.
Yeah.
That's, I
It's
mean,
been,
and you still have time left, so
yep.
you're in such a strong position.
Yeah. So like
Wow.
back of mind stretch goal at this point, it's not hard to think that I could hit 500 this year. We have 3 weeks left of November. If we have 1 or 2 hot weeks in
Yeah.
there, can
Yeah.
easily get to mid 400s, and then we'll see.
Yeah.
But like we were talking about earlier, it could be dead. We never know. So
Yeah.
just one day at
Yeah.
a time, we'll see what the market gives us. And
Yeah.
but yeah, it's been a good year.
Hmm.
Um, Last year, after 2022 was so hard and slow,
Hmm.
I think really what I started to understand and realize was that I was just buying too high. Every time
Hmm.
I'm having a hard time in the market, it's because I'm buying too high. I'm
Hmm.
chasing
Hmm. Hmm.
things as they're going up, either because of FOMO or whatever.
Yeah.
And then I'll take losses or I'll barely get anything out of the trade. And so like you were talking about with that huge red day, anytime that I'm just struggling or in a drawdown or whatever, I always try to go back to basics, and almost always the answer is I'm buying too high.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I think I could say the same for myself. The thing is, it's tough because in a hot market, when it's really hot, you can get away to a certain extent with chasing. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
you buy high and the things just keep going. But
Yep.
when the market cools off, that strategy that doesn't work as well anymore.
Yep.
And so it's like sometimes it's like what am I doing different? It's nothing you're doing different. It's the
Right.
market has
The
shifted.
market.
You
Yeah.
didn't shift fast enough. You've got to adapt to that change in the market. And
Yep.
I would say that's the one thing that I've observed in you from sort of the outside perspective. I remember especially in August when you were struggling, as I was thinking, I've been through this before, and where you go on these sort of like drawdowns, and it's like the right thing to do is to step back and kind of really restrict yourself into trader rehab, like scale down,
Yeah.
size down. Because the deeper you dig that hole when you start spiraling, the bigger the emotions get. And it's like, in hindsight, it's like, yeah, I wish I had slowed down sooner so I could have dug the hole half as deep,
Yep.
But in the moment, you keep thinking maybe today's the day it's going to turn.
Yeah,
And like,
exactly.
I might make 5,000 today.
Yep.
But then you're down another
Yep.
2,500, another 2,500. And next thing you know, it's
Yep.
like, oh my gosh, this is unreal. And I think my feeling is that as much as I say, and it'd be like, you gotta slow down this and that. There's a certain extent that we have to learn these things kind of ourselves and go through the experience of like, wow, that was painful. I thought, this was gonna work, but it didn't.
Yeah.
So that pain is what's gonna remind me the next time I start a drawdown to get my foot off the gas real quick.
Yeah.
And that's something I've been doing this for a really long time. And when I do these sessions with Ted, it's like he's like, Ross, you have no problem putting your foot on the gas. When
Yeah.
the market's hot, next thing you know, you're having big green days. Your problem is slowing down because you
Hmm.
all of a sudden, I'll have that final trade where I'm in way too high, and
Yeah.
then I get stubborn. I add more, I add more. It's a huge loss. And then I have a huge red day, max loss red day. I come back day two to
Yeah.
swing hard to make it all back. Second red day in a row. Come
Yep.
back day three, third red day in a row. I remember once having 6 red days in a row, and each one of them were
I've
max
been there.
loss.
Yeah,
So it's
I've
like,
had like
whoa,
six in a
this is
row too.
crazy.
It's awful. Yeah. And you feel
And
like
and
you're
that's
never
the
going to be green
emotion.
again.
You feel that way. That's the thing. You feel when you're down like that, you feel like it's never going to come back. And
Hmm.
it is incredible how in those moments the market really does feel different. I
Oh,
mean,
totally.
it's
Yeah.
not like you're not wrong in being like, "Wow, what is wrong? This isn't working." Like
Hmm.
it's not working because the strategies depending on market conditions,
Yeah.
have different performance.
And part of the problem, I think, is as a trader, at least in my opinion, it kind of forces you to be an internal optimist.
Yeah. Yeah.
It, if you're pessimistic or you're down on yourself or just negative, it's not going to help you trade better.
That's right.
And so you have to come in every day thinking, today's going to be better, or I'm going
Right.
to trade better today, or the market's going to give us something different today.
Yeah.
Uh, and sometimes that's just not the case. And I kind of
Yeah.
went through that. Just this September, I had mentioned was a record red month.
That's
Let me
right.
let
Yeah.
me think. I think I was at like 150,000 in my account. Took like a 15 or $18,000 red day. Withdrew 50 to protect myself and just take profit out. Because I was like, and it's usually that time of year too, like end of August,
Yep.
September-ish, that I'll take like a big red day, and then that's the start of the drawdown.
Mm-hmm.
So this time I took out a big chunk of profit that I would just, not lose. And then maybe a good thing I did that because I went from like, I think I was probably at about 80,000 in the account, and the bottom of my drawdown was when I had 25,000 in the account. So
That's
I
a
was
steep
in
drop
like,
down. Yeah.
yeah, I was in like a $55,000 drawdown, um, which was like 15% of my profit for the year, which is like still manageable, but like not good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Need to fix it at that point.
Yeah.
And so finally, what I did was I was literally physically restricted in my share size because I just didn't have the buying power or the leverage anymore.
Right.
And I had two of my buddies um, check in on my P&L every 5 minutes past the market open,
Wow.
and I had a strict max loss of 1,000.
Hmm.
And this was for the first week or 2 weeks or so. And they would be checking in with me, and if I didn't respond, they would just start spamming me and calling me.
That's
Uh,
trader rehab. That's really good. You had a sponsor in a way.
exactly. Yeah, I had some sponsors, and if I hit max loss, I had to send a picture of my stuff shut down, and I wasn't able to trade the rest of the day. And one thing that that did for me was I really didn't want to hit max loss and have to shut everything down. So I was as selective as I could be with the trades I was taking. I did hit max loss 2 days. I hit a $1,300 red day just because I think it was just a bad day.
Yeah.
Um, one day. And then the next week, I had like a $3,000 red day because I got caught in a halt down and an offering at the same time on two different stocks. And that really sucked and it hurt because I had gone from like 25 to 30 that week and then just another knockback down.
Right.
Um, but I kept going with that, with the accountability, um, and then the next week the market got better, and I had a $6,000 green week. I went from like 27 to 33 in the account, and then the next week was a record green week, 38,000, and then the following was 37,000. So
Boom.
in two
Accounts back
weeks,
over 100. Yeah. It's
yeah,
crazy.
2 weeks went from 34 to like um over 100 in the account. So
Wow.
and that's all I've found that you really have to do is just like we were talking about, keep your head down, just take one
Hmm.
day at a time, one trade at a time, and
Yeah.
all of a sudden things can change. Or
And
if
then you
they
get that
don't,
confidence,
yeah.
because then all of a sudden it's like, it's crazy how suddenly you get a couple nice trades. Now your confidence is coming back. So now
Yeah.
you feel confident taking a few more trades, taking bigger
Yeah.
size. And now you're on this positive feedback loop that's like just
Yep.
reaffirming, like, I know what I'm doing.
Yep.
And it can pick up quick. But the exact opposite can happen with a negative feedback
Mhm.
loop where
Yeah.
you have a loss of confidence. And either what should happen is loss of confidence, you trade less. But what ends up often happening is desperation, you trade more, you
Mhm.
increase size, emotions get
Yep.
bigger. Now you trade even more. And now it's like,
Yeah.
and that is that's the aspect of trading where, you know, it's psychological, it's mental. And to a
Yeah.
certain extent, there's certain aptitudes that you have to bring to the table that no amount of strategy can overcome. And
Right.
one of yours is that you're capable of being very disciplined. You're super disciplined with going to the gym. You're super
Mhm.
disciplined with swimming. You're disciplined,
Yeah.
like you exhibit all the characteristics of someone who's able to hold a lot of discipline. And you need that for trading.
Totally. Yeah. And actually, what I've discovered recently, maybe was talking with Ted, but what I've discovered recently is the type of discipline that you need for trading can be a little bit different than the type of
Mm,
discipline that I need to be going to the gym 6 days a week. Uh,
mm,
and that's a really interesting point that I had never really thought about. I was like,
mm,
and this is like during September when I was having such a hard time. I was like, I'm so disciplined in everything I do in my life, basically. Why is it so hard for me sometimes to do the right thing trading when I'm having a hard time? And that was kind of one aha type of moment that we had had was the type of discipline that you need to be good at trading isn't necessarily showing up and doing it every day. If there's
mm,
nothing to do, It's different than going to the gym every day, or it's just a different type of discipline. The
Yeah.
discipline might be watching and sitting and not doing anything because the things that you're best at trading aren't in front of you.
Yeah.
And actually, at this point, I have a little sticky note with my three best things
Good for
right in
you.
front of me on my desk.
Yeah. I
Just
usually keep a
a little
couple
reminder.
on my desk as well. Mine,
Yeah.
mine
Yeah.
was my recent one was size down and discipline yourself. And it size down specifically at the open because I noticed
Yeah.
these metrics where it was a period of time, but it was like you got to adjust, you got to adapt. You know, we all set goals of where we want to be. You've got kind of a goal of where you want to be at the end of the year. Assuming the market stays hot,
Mhm.
what do you think you need to do in order to be able to, like, what are the steps that you want to take to like improve your trading over the next few weeks, few months?
Really clear to me. And I've actually been doing a lot of work and thought on this just in the last week or so. Because I had $100,000 green month last month.
Yep.
And on the last day, made some bad decisions, had a $17,000 red day.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, for one thing, I was over 100,000 on the month. And obviously that's a goal that I want to do again.
Yep.
And I think that I can do that again. Um, how am I going to get there? The biggest 2 points for me, I think, are a combination of patience and willingness to be aggressive. And by patience, I
Mm.
mean not necessarily like when I have a position or I'm in a trade, but in waiting for the things that I'm best at trading. And that's pretty much three or four things. Number one is like parabolic action. I'm really good at trading stuff that's squeezing. Number two is halts, which is basically similar idea.
Yeah. Dip and
Um,
rip or false
yeah,
halt stuff. Yep.
yeah, false halts, stuff like that. And then the third one is just price action that is easy enough for me to read, which is not going to be like my outlier green days, but it's going to be my base hit type of days. And
Hmm.
sometimes, kind of like today, I'm sitting up over 11,000. It
Nice.
started off slow, and I was just patient and doing base hits and base hits and base hits, and then all of a sudden something goes parabolic and squeezes into halts and
Mm.
then makes up the rest of my day. So just having the patience to wait for that type of action that I know I'm really good at trading and not getting caught up in um, one of the drawbacks of being in a room where there are a lot of good traders is there are a lot of different strategies. And just because somebody is making money on this different strategy that they trade doesn't mean that I should be trading it. And
I struggle with that too. I get a little FOMO seeing other people
yeah,
like, oh, darn it. Maybe I should have, could have, would have.
yeah, totally. And just realizing that maybe it's not worth the mental capital. Maybe I could try to learn that strategy better, but why? I could just focus more on doing better at the stuff I already know how to trade well.
Yeah.
So having the patience to wait for that and then just being willing to be as aggressive as I know I need to be,
Yeah.
meaning by the end of the year, I have a goal of doubling the share size that I'm currently using,
I
or
love that. Yeah.
yeah, or at least like that I was using a couple of weeks ago, because I'm already making progress on that.
Good.
And then next year, I have a goal of doubling the size that I'm using by the end of the year. So for me at this point, I'm like, yeah, every now and then I have a solid red day, but
Yep.
generally, as long as I'm kind of following what I know I do well, I'm going up quite well over time. And so the only two things that I really need to focus on are being patient to wait for those things and being willing to be as aggressive as I know that I need to be on the front side in the
Man, that's
action that I
such,
recognize.
you're saying the front side. That's one that I think about a lot because I tend to, I feel like I tend to sometimes under trade the front side and then
Me too.
overcompensate for it by over trading the back side.
Yep.
And I'm like,
Yep.
why didn't, and I sometimes will end up, it happened today. I had $11,000 of profit on this one stock and I gave back 4,000 off the top. So I finished up only 7,000 on that stock. And it was like,
Yeah.
why didn't you just stop? when we had the MACD crossover, when it was so
Mhm.
obvious that we were on the backside. I mean, yeah, sometimes I can scrounge a couple of dips and this and that, but
Mhm.
I'm over trading the backside. And what if I just wait for the next stock on the
Yeah.
front side and hit that one really hard and
Hmm.
just only do front side and stop goosing around. I say goosing
Yep.
around because, but stop goosing around with trading the backside of these, because it's like it feels like clockwork that I get
Hmm.
back 25% of my
Hmm.
profit on every stock I trade, which on
Yep.
the one hand, I do often say that if you don't start giving back profit, you don't know that you peaked. So you got to push it until you give back a little off the top.
Yeah.
But I often seem to give back a little more than I'd like.
I totally agree. Yeah. And the other thing is like sometimes, and it depends on the market you're in, but you don't always know that it is the front side of what is going to be a really good move.
I know.
Eventually, sometimes that becomes clear, and you're
Yeah.
like, okay, I can actually be really aggressive here if I want to. But sometimes you only know it's the backside because it's like clearly the backside.
Right.
And sometimes you only know that because hopefully you avoided the big red candle. I'm looking at CELU right in front of me here where
Mm.
halted up, gapped up, opened higher, went straight up into another halt. That halt resumed lower, big red candle. Um, so yeah, it's like sometimes you only know it's backside because you just got hurt pretty bad, or like it's really clearly backside. But yeah, and it can be kind of scary to be that aggressive on the front side because you're like, it is the start of a move. You don't know how high it's going to go yet. You don't know how strong it's going to be. And like a lot of the shorts in the market sometimes have it way easier because, we have momentum scanners, but that doesn't tell us how high it's going to go or how strong it's going to be. Whereas if you're short, you already know how high it went and how much
Sure.
potential range there is to the downside that you can work with.
Right.
Um,
Shorting
so,
against the previous high is like, as
right.
long as it doesn't make a new high, I'm
Yeah.
in the driver's seat. The only
Mhm.
problem is when they break the new high, halt up, and then do like
And
5 halts in a row and go
yeah,
up
which is
20
really
points.
fun for us.
Yeah. But as I look at that chart on
Yeah.
CELU, I see
Mhm.
what you mean, where you had that ramp up, little pullback, ramp up, pullback, halt up, open higher into a second halt, then
Yeah.
drops down on high volume red.
Mhm.
MACD crosses over, and then it tries to come up again, but
Yeah.
MACD is negative on that second attempt and it doesn't go. And that's a spot where you could have gotten caught up there around 480 thinking
Mhm.
it's going to rip and halt up, and the next thing you know, you're
Little.
stopping out at $4
Yeah.
and you're red on the stock. You go from
Yep.
green on it to red, and
And
that's
you're
emotional
upset, and
trigger.
that's the type of thing that could put you on a bad red day.
Right. It's a
Um,
spiral. Do you try to build a cushion on the day before you size up, or do you not really think about that?
no, not really. I'm not necessarily looking to build a cushion. I do like if we're talking about when the market opens, I will observe like volume and range and direction, but pretty much like when I have a feel of how it's moving,
Mhm.
I'll just pretty much be getting in there.
Yeah.
Not necessarily with like third size or half size. It's like
You go full
if I'm
size right away if you see the setup you like.
pretty much, yeah, but like at the open, my full size isn't going to be that big.
Okay.
Relatively. I'm willing to do like 2 to 3 times what that size is later in the day, I guess. So yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily think of it as building a cushion as much as just getting in tune with how things are moving that day.
Do you think about daily goal, or do you not have a daily goal that you work with?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I get that question a lot in the mentor sessions that I do. I don't have a daily goal at all. And I honestly don't totally know how to think about a daily goal in terms of like, is it good or bad? I think that for a very experienced trader like you or like me, like you have a daily goal. I have numbers in my mind that I'm like, okay, that's a respectable day. And it also
Hmm.
depends on what the market's giving us.
Yeah.
But with the experience that we have, we also know like things are slowing down, it's time to back off, doesn't really matter what number I hit. Or
Totally.
if I stick around and like today this thing pops up and doubles my day, it's like, well, what if I had shut down just because I had hit this arbitrary number
Yep.
we were talking about earlier? The market doesn't care about
Yep.
you and your profit and your numbers. I don't
Yeah.
necessarily have a daily goal. I have like I'll look at the moves that we had, the opportunity that we had, and like, does it match up with how I trade? How do I feel like I did on that? What mistakes did I make that day? What can I try to do better the next day? Um, but it's all just a process over time trying to
Mhm.
do better. Um,
Do you use a max loss?
I never have. Yeah, for me, it just hasn't historically been the right thing. Like yesterday, I went from up 2000 pre-market to taking some bad hits on DJT as it halted down at the open. I was up two to down five and finished the day up six. So
Yeah, it's a big
um
swing.
yeah, and I don't like days like that. I don't like when my trading looks like that, which is
Yeah.
I think a big reason why my trading today was much smoother and just up.
You're such an active trader. I'm kind of, sometimes I think that in theory, if I had enough trades every day, I would never have a red day because my
Yeah.
accuracy is almost 70%. So if I always had 10 more trades, seven of them would be winners. But so
Yeah.
part of me is like, even if I had the misfortune of going deep red on the first three,
Hmm.
keep trading. But in reality, and I think that's more so for you because you trade even more than me. Because in reality,
And
for
on
me,
Pacific time. So the market opens at
right,
6:30 and I can sit
right,
here for
because you're
two
in
to three
California.
hours and it's still early.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, I feel like for me, I often will feel like I'm running out of time, and I'm
Yeah.
like,
Hmm.
if I'm this red at this point in the day, and because I'm always sort of thinking about preserving that optimal mental state, I
Yeah.
never really want to let myself draw
Yep.
down more than X amount that I could recover in
Hmm.
one day. So my
Yeah.
daily max loss is the same as my daily goal.
Hmm.
And I do keep those numbers in my mind. So I'm like, if I have a max loss day, I can recover it in the next day
Yeah.
without a challenge. And I don't go into like, the type of drawdown that's going to take, you know, 15, 20 days to recover from.
Yeah.
Not
Hmm.
that I couldn't do it in one day if the market was crazy hot, but that
Right.
realistically it wouldn't happen.
Yeah.
So like I keep myself a lot more. I have a lot. I have guardrails on, but sometimes, and I know if Jess has said this, that he trades with zero rules whatsoever because he's like, I have that rule, I have that guardrail, and the next thing you know, we have a stock like CELU that goes
Yeah.
up 200% in the afternoon, and I miss it because I hit
Right.
my max loss. Well, now I just stopped myself from taking a great trade. Could have been
Yep.
back to green. So who's the
Yeah.
dummy now?
And frequently we say to ourselves the best opportunity probably is tomorrow.
Yeah.
And frequently that's true, but just like you said, sometimes the best opportunity might be later in the day when you've hit your max loss, but something's going parabolic and you're like, well, what do I do then? I do
Mm,
really agree with you with what you said about preserving your mental state, your mental capacity. I think that's like the most important thing. And just like I have a couple of notes on my desk about the things that I should be trading, I have in my notes the things that I know tend to trigger me and tend to set me off in a bad spiral, either into revenge trading, because I'm like, I see Nvidia doing something, I take a loss on it, it's like a $200 loss, whatever, I'll make that back on the next one that I take. Okay, now I'm down 800 on it. Now I'm kind of
mm,
pissed. And
right.
um, so just avoiding that kind of stuff in general
Yep.
from the start is the best way for me to keep myself in a good mental state and hopefully that like positive spiral that we were talking about. But yeah, as far as like an
Mm,
actual max loss, I think my opinion is that it kind of depends on the individual. For me, it's never been quite the right thing. I have countless days going from like down thousands to um well into the green thousands, and
sure.
they're definitely not my favorite types of days, but what if I had stopped at lows? So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it just depends.
Yeah, yeah, no, I think for a beginner trader, I mean, I think the right way to learn, and not everyone has the opportunity. Most people don't have the opportunity to learn the right way. They're self-taught, they make a lot of
Mhm.
mistakes. But I
Mhm.
think the right way to learn is to learn with some real guardrails on,
Yeah.
because those help you avoid making a huge mistake at the beginning
Yeah.
and then spending the whole first part of your career in the shadow of this big loss.
Yeah. I
So
totally
just
agree with that.
it's like keeping yourself just as safe as possible, and you did that in a lot of ways by trading with really small size at the beginning, which was
Mhm.
a factor of starting when you're younger and just not having as much money. That's
Yeah,
one of the
partially.
advantages with starting when you're younger that people sometimes think is not an advantage. Oh, I need more money. I actually think there's a lot to be said for starting with less. Rock bottom
Yeah.
is closer. You make big mistakes. You have big wake up calls. The
Yeah.
total cost of your education was a lot lower than
Yeah.
someone who might have been in their 40s or 50s with a six-figure IRA that they start trading in
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
start just holding positions overnight, hoping they'll turn around. Next thing you know, they're down 70%
Yeah.
and get
Yeah,
really mad.
totally. The total cost of my tuition was extremely low, all things considered. I paid a lot
Yeah.
more to go to college than I paid to learn how to trade the markets. And
Yeah.
um, yeah, I totally agree with that. Especially for a beginner, I think the most important thing that you can do is just keep yourself in the market learning and losing as little as possible and hopefully making some gains while you're learning too. But that's not necessarily the main point at that time.
What does your life look like now that, you've had this incredible year? I mean, how has your life changed from 4 years ago, especially through this year where now you've really got a bit of a tailwind?
I mean, financially, my life has changed quite a bit. I think probably the biggest thing that has changed is my mindset in general. My personality is the same. I think that my personality hasn't really changed at all, which I'm kind of proud of. You know, a lot of people maybe make a lot of money, not necessarily that I've made a lot of money. I've made good money, but
But I do recall that you drive a car that starts with a P and ends with a Porsche.
yeah, that did change.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I've always been interested in Porsches
Yeah.
and
Me too.
finally this year had the opportunity financially to afford one of my dream cars, which is not necessarily an 88, but the one I bought is a 1988
That's cool.
Porsche 911, which is a lot of fun. A lot of
Yeah.
fun owning in general, but sometimes for me, it's nice to have physical reminders of this is what my hard work and dedication and focus and study for years and years has gotten me.
Hmm.
And I know that there can be more too if I keep up with it. And so that's yeah, that's one thing, of course. But I have a lot more freedom and flexibility in just what I do day to day, what my life looks like, what I get to imagine my life can look like, and some things that make me really happy, like being able to take care of people around me, that has never changed. It has gotten better
Yeah.
since making profit in the market. Like I can pay for a nice dinner for everybody in one good day of profit.
Yeah.
So like I like to have dinner parties with friends and stuff like that where I'll cook for them and that makes me feel really good. Or
I mean, it's amazing. I think about this often. Sometimes when I'll have a nice day trading. So today I'm up $13,366. If
uh
I go to the grocery store today, there's nothing in the grocery store that I could possibly put in my cart
yeah.
that's gonna move the like. It doesn't matter.
Hmm.
And just that, and if you want to shop for friends or you want to take friends out to dinner,
Yeah.
it's the ability to make that kind of money, period, even if you were doing it in for 8 hours a day working. But then the
Yeah.
additional fact that realistically, I today I traded for like 2.5 hours.
Yeah. I
It's a
think
real,
that
we're so fortunate.
I think that I was in the market for like 4 hours today. I stayed a little bit longer because I things were slow. I ate some breakfast. I was about to go to the gym. Then CELU started moving, so I was here for a little bit
Mhm.
longer. But yeah, I totally agree, and I feel like almost there's somewhat of a responsibility to to do that and be good to the people around you
Yep.
that just not that they're not as fortunate because a lot of my friends have good jobs, but
Sure.
um, it's just really nice when people take care of you. And
Yeah.
it feels really good for me to be able to do that. And I know that they appreciate it. So, like, that's a huge part of it. But then just mentally, financially, I don't have to worry about anything. And especially with like inflation and the cost of groceries and stuff like this. And I was on the phone with my dad the other week. My flight to go visit my family for Thanksgiving was like triple what it normally would be. And I was talking with him and I was like, thank God I do what I do and that I have gotten good at it because, most people just wouldn't be able to go see their family for
Right.
Thanksgiving because of that.
Yeah.
So it's stuff like that. It has just allowed me to have a lot more freedom and flexibility in how I live my life, and also just the opportunities and things that I consider doing. Or, um, yeah, it's much different.
And you
It's
could
been a really
travel.
good thing.
You've traveled quite a
Mhm.
bit in these last few years, which is
Yeah,
something you
yeah.
wouldn't be able to do ordinarily.
When I started trading in 2020, I had had a dream of moving to Italy and trading, which has changed a little bit now. I don't necessarily want to live in Italy, and trade and have my life centered there, but I do get to visit whenever I want, really. I think Japan might be up next on the list, but
Yeah. It's going to
um,
be early, late nights.
I know. Yeah. That's one thing that I have to consider because my girlfriend is like, we could go to Hawaii. I'm like, yeah, it's a pretty easy flight, but the market opens at 3:30 in the morning there.
Yeah.
So when I'm in Europe, trading is really easy. The market opens at 3:30 in the afternoon.
Yeah.
So
Super easy.
um, yeah, that's definitely a first world problem. But
What would you say would be your biggest words of wisdom for someone who's at the beginning of their learning curve, who's, kind of back where you were when you were getting started? What do you wish maybe you had done differently and you'd encourage someone to do?
I don't think that I wish or would have wished that I did anything differently. I think that there were probably a few things that I did really well. Number one, probably being that I kept myself in the market. I kept myself in the game. I didn't have an opportunity really to be completely knocked out. And um, not that it is going to work for 100% of people, but I think, if you can rack up a year or 2 years or 3 years of experience, I think at that point, just your likelihood of getting it, finding an edge somewhere,
Survive till you thrive.
yeah, just has such a better chance if you're able to do that.
Yeah.
Um,
You
so
gain a
that's
lot of
probably,
experience showing up every day.
yeah, that's probably the first thing is just don't let yourself get knocked out. And then probably the second is why are you doing it? For me, it was really, really clear that I wanted to have something that I could earn an income on my own. A big part of that being a former high level athlete was and sales right out of college was that I really enjoyed seeing the output of whatever I was putting in directly. I really didn't like the idea of like, this is my salary. Maybe next year it gets bumped 3% and that's my life.
I know.
Yeah, that was a big part for me, just like financially and like, what am I going to do the rest of my life? I had an existential crisis one time driving into San Francisco across the Bay Bridge. I was just in traffic with everybody else, and Welcome to the Machine by Pink Floyd came
Yeah.
on my shuffle, and I was like, this is a nightmare.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so for me, I
Mm.
desperately wanted to find a way out of that. I didn't want my life to look like that. And like I said earlier, seeing you having found the way out and seeing that other people had too, I was like, I have to. I have
Yeah.
to figure it out. I can't let myself get knocked out. And I have to figure out how to make those big losses smaller and further apart and figure out how to make some more in the meantime.
And for you guys that are watching this, you're learning about what the path out looks like. I think there is the path most traveled when it comes to how to approach trading, And what we know is that most people that take that path, well, the statistic is the path most traveled is people lose money.
Mhm.
So you've got to really think about what is it that most people are doing that's resulting in them losing. And my opinion is they come into the market really without strategy, kind of shooting from the hip, taking too much risk, and then they just sort of
Yeah.
spiral out. And
Mhm.
then what's the path that people are taking where they're finding success?
Yeah.
And we're always going to say that, of course, my results aren't typical, and neither are Danny's. We know that trading is risky, but if you want to emulate anyone or look up to anyone, it's someone that's found the path,
Mhm.
and I think that's a really good starting point. So this has been really interesting, and I hope that everyone watching this really enjoyed it. And thank you for spending some time telling people about your story. I love hearing it. You've done
Thank
great, and
you.
I'm so excited to see what the next 6 months, what the ne/ 12 months look like for you. Just
Me
keep your head
too.
down and keep chipping away.
Me too. I have big plans. Obviously, some slash a lot of that depends on what the market gives us, but
Yep.
um, if the market's there for it, I'm really excited for what we can do. And then I hear maybe there's another summit coming up
Yeah.
sometime.
Yeah, there will be. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's going to be fun. Having a get together where we can all be in person and trade together is
Yeah.
going to be awesome. So
Yeah.
I think, yeah, right now we're looking at spring. So late winter, spring. Yeah,
All right, cool.
cool. All
I'll
right.
be
Well, thank you guys for tuning into this episode, and we'll see you for the next one real soon.